how real is the Samson option?
Well, I've been hearing about it for like 30 years at least. I think it's just sort of it's been known. I don't know how it's known exactly, but I don't think there's a whole lot of debate about it. Yeah, maybe even 40 years ago that I heard about the Samson option, that Israel had these nuclear weapons. Again, it's not official; it's not been declared, but everybody knows it. And so every once in a while, a U.S. government official will let it slip and then deny, "Oh, I didn't mean to say that," but we all know it. Anywhere, I think, from 90 to 250, something like that. You hear different estimates, but a considerable number, and that these nuclear warheads have their designated targets. Up to and including Moscow is what I heard. But again, this was decades ago.
But when we say up to, I mean, are we talking about up to like in Moscow? Or are they going for America as well?
I haven't heard about them. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they really have the capability. I don't think they have ICBMs. They have the Jericho 3 or something, which is capable, I think, of reaching Moscow. But I don't think they can cross oceans. I don't think they have that capability. But of course, they could do a great deal of damage to Europe and to Middle Eastern capitals. There's no question about it. And it's kind of hard to believe that they would have these nuclear weapons, which everybody concedes, and that they wouldn't have this plan, or they wouldn't let it be known that they have this plan, because that's the whole point of having the nuclear weapons is scaring everybody of the consequences of an Israeli defeat. So this is, if I hadn't heard about the Samson's option, I would just assume that it was there and that they had whispered in the ears of all these, different Western leaders. That's what Israel would do. And I would say it's hard to believe that they wouldn't do that.
Right. Well, I mean, they can't let it be known. I mean,
of course, it can't be official, but it's just that it's, but they let it be known, through unofficial channels, and Western leaders understand what they're dealing with.
Well, they shouldn't even let it be known through unofficial channels. I feel like it's so damning. Now that people are know what just the fact that people know what the Samson option is now, I mean, then that just means like, who are these people? That's the attitude of toddlers playing a game. You just rage quit. You're just like, if I can't have my way, then I'm going to flip the table over. Except we're talking about killing millions, tens of millions of people. Like that, nobody. How can you look at somebody like that, a country like that? And
but I mean, that's the logic of nuclear war and nuclear weapons. I mean, that's the logic of it. So you want to create a deterrence, and that's how you do it. And
but it's not.
I'm sure that people looking at that say, "Yeah, these guys are crazy. Let's not push them too hard." Because
but we're not even
crazy,
pushing them.
That's
what's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So we're not even getting close to doing that. We can't let them lose a war.
Right, but that's what's so crazy. It's not even pushing them. It's like, if you don't support us enough to allow us to commit a genocide, then we will nuke all of your major cities. That's the idea, right? Like, how crazy is that? So you got to keep on supporting me, or I'll just kill you.
Right. Well, I don't know that it really extends. It could be with people like Smotrich and so on. It could extend to Palestine. Say, you don't let us take Palestine, we'll nuke you. But that's not the Samson option. The Samson option really would be that let's say they get into a war with Iran, and Iran, is clearly winning. The future of Israel is in doubt. That's when they go to the Samson option, or they threaten it, or maybe they fire they launch the first nuclear warhead. But as for Gaza, unfortunately, I think they can get away with it, and nobody's going to intervene. Nobody's threatening them. So I think it's really the Samson option comes into play if there's a real war that threatens their future existence.
But that's where we're heading, right? I mean, we started talking about.
Well, that again is Iran's aware of that too, and that's one reason they're really in a difficult position. Is that we're fighting for our own existence, but if we start to win the war, then our existence is further threatened. So what do? I think actually the logic is that the Iranians need to acquire a nuclear weapon. The Israelis understand that if they push the Iranians too far, there's a chance that they could get nuked. I mean, that's the terrible, terrible logic that we're looking at.
Well, do they have to? I mean, if there's countries like Pakistan that could maybe do it on loan, say like, look, we got your back. If Israel hurls a nuke, we'll hurl one too. You know, it's just so crazy we're talking about this, but I think this is where we're happening. I just feel like we're going to see a mushroom cloud in the next couple of years, and that's just crazy. That's crazy. Do you think? What do you think? If you're taking the over/unders, mushroom cloud in the next 2 years, take the over or the under?
Well, I will still say that probably not, but I mean the chance of it happening is greater than it's been in a long, long time. You know, ever since the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Do you think we're at a more precarious point right now than the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Well, in a way, I think, you know, we had, well, you know, it's hard to say. We got pretty close there at that time. And we're talking about, you know, a full-scale nuclear war that could have maybe not ended the planet or ended, you know, human civilization, but would have perhaps sent us back to the Stone Age. I mean, that was really a possibility back then. You know, the thing is that we did have actually intelligence leaders. We had statesmen back then in the U.S., in Europe, and in the Soviet Union. And they did pull us back from the brink. You know, again, we do not have statesmen certainly in the West. And so there is, and there does seem to be a certain recklessness, you know, just this, a lack of any kind of healthy fear of using nuclear weapons, or lack of fear of nuclear war in general that we used to have, and you know, kept us safe for all those years of the Cold War. It's not there, and then we have these conflicts that could, both in the Middle East and in Europe, that could spin out of control. So it's, you know, we're not there yet. You know, we're talking about hypotheticals. But when we get there, I'll be really scared because, you know, we just don't have, you know, stable people with a real firm grasp of reality leading our countries.
Yeah, there's also just, I think, just sort of a general apathy or ignorance, because during the Cold War, I mean, I've seen the footage. They had schools were doing nuclear drills. You know, everybody was aware of the potential nuclear threat. Yeah. Here, it just feels like we're just la-di-da-da-da-da walking off the cliff, you know?
Right. Yeah. And then there were marches and peace movements, like to get the intermediate nuclear forces out of Europe. You know, there was that kind of thing. People were concerned about it. It was something that kept people up at night, at least some of us. And it was a concern, you know, that extended to our leadership. It was just, and so it caused them to behave more cautiously. You know, it was realized that there was a real close call back there in 1962, and that sobered up, you know, the leadership, I think, on both sides of the Cold War. And that, you know, it's just the leadership we have now is anything but sober, right? And the people too, as you say, just seem to be apathetic. They just, I think it's like what we've entered into a postmodern world where everything is about the construction of the narrative, and it's not about reality anymore. And in the narrative, it's about moral purity, and a part of moral purity is like not letting the Russians frighten you with the talk of nuclear war or whatever. You know, that would be somehow adopting a Russian, you know, Putin talking point, or, you know, again, this is all just narrative. You say, well, I don't care if it's a new Putin talking point. You know, it's nuclear war is something to be worried about, my friend. You know, but it's just there's so many of us can't think that way anymore. We're just lost within the narrative, and that's, again, it's a dangerous state of affairs.
Yeah. Do you think, this just crossed my mind, maybe it's crazy, I was just thinking about the Samson option, and, you know, you mentioned nuking Moscow, and who wants to nuke Moscow more than anybody would be Ukraine, Zelensky. I just wonder if something happens in the Ukraine war still going on, they're losing, they're on the back foot. If Iran and Israel start back up and they're on the back foot, I wonder if there's some type of collaboration. Okay, let's do this. we're going all out world war now. We'll help you hit Moscow. You come here. We're going to get the U.S. to go through Iran and attack China through Iran. And it's just going to be all out. We're going on all out blitz. And that feels like the only thing they can do to win, because Israel is dug its own grave with its actions. Ukraine cannot win. NATO won't be able to save them. We've expended all their equipment. We realize our economic sanctions don't work against them. Our military equipment is no good. So what do we got to do? We just gotta blow it all up. Do you think that's
Yeah. Well, there are crazy people like that. I mean, obviously the most obvious is Zelensky and his regime. Clearly, he wants to bring NATO into this. In other words, he wants to World War III. He's always looking for a way to start World War III. And so that's dangerous. We have him there. And, so far he hasn't succeeded. I think that whole, all the drone nonsense that took place in Poland was an attempt, again, to bring NATO in. But there are people, fortunately, I think they're a minority, but there are people within the West who want to go there. There's no question about it, and they're always pushing, for increased escalation, up to including direct conflict between Russia and NATO, and they're on the losing side so far, but you think about like what happened in the case of Iran. For all those years, again and again, the realists won out. We're not going to fight Iran. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. And they would always win every time the anti-Iran hawks began to make another push for war. They would push back, and it wouldn't happen. And we've seen that, I think, also in the case of Ukraine. There have been these attempts to provoke NATO intervention. They failed. It's like when push comes to shove, NATO will actually make it clear, no, we're not doing that. And that happened again with the drones. Even though all these Western leaders and Western media hyped it up as something really major, basically an attack on Poland, NATO, the NATO statement was much more careful and made it clear that there wasn't any grounds for a NATO response. So far, it's like the sane people are still in charge. They may be evil, they may be, warmongers, but they're sane. But who knows? It's just like when the temperature gets really high. It's just like when the Ukrainian lines truly collapse, as we've said many times, or the Russian forces cross the Dnieper, or they march on Kiev, or they're marching on Odessa, or they take Odessa. Something at some point. The dam may break, within the Western leadership, and the crazies just may start winning the argument because of all the hysteria. Think if there was so much hysteria over these plywood and foam decoys that somehow flew into Polish airspace. Imagine the hysteria that's going to, take place when the Russians cross the Dnieper and are marching on Odessa or surrounding Kiev or something like that. It's going to be hard to fight, and then there's a real danger of a larger conflict. It may be that's in the end, the sane people will win out and they'll just admit defeat, and we can just breathe a huge sigh of relief. But right now, I just don't know who to bet on. It is scary. It could happen.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm resigning myself to the fact that there's going to be some huge conflict, and obviously the U.S. is going to be involved. I'm just not fully sure what capacity, because I don't think that there's any appetite for any boots on the ground. I think for Western Europeans or the Americans. So I just don't understand how it's going to play out.
Right, exactly. There are real breaks and some major obstacles to that scenario, the scenario of World War III in Europe. But again, we have the crazies lined up on the other side, and who knows how the hysteria will affect the populations. They may really, like within Europe, maybe they'll really buy it, and maybe they'll believe that they are truly threatened and actually, start showing up at the conscription offices, or the enlistment offices, I guess I should say, right?
Yeah. Well, I hope we're wrong. I hope that I'm just in my own bubble and I'm creating these nightmare scenarios just completely in my head. But it just when I just look at it and think about it more, I'm just like, yeah, I don't see off ramps. I just and the fact that there was the initial hope, well, with a lot of people when Trump first got elected, like, okay, is he going to end the war in the Ukraine? He got a ceasefire between Israel and Gaza. Maybe this can happen, but where I'm looking at right now, I just don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. I just feel like this is where we're going. I was really hoping that Trump would be like, let the Ukrainians vote whether they want this war. Like this martial law crap has got to stop. Both Zelensky and Netanyahu, it's like the only way we stay in power is if we keep these wars going. We just no, we won't show up for corruption trials and just keep the war going. We won't do any elections, ignore these, we'll force conscript people. It's like, it's just awful. It just seems like just an easy moral thing to do as a person. I just thought the president had some power and that they could do it, but I didn't know how compromised our government is and how complicated.
Well, yeah, I think in the case of, I think Trump actually doesn't support the Ukraine war, and he's made some efforts, to bring it to an end. But I just think he simply lacks really it was good, it'd be tough in any case. I know I've said this before, but I'll just say it again. It'd just be tough for even the most experienced statesman to bring an end to this war. I think there's no question about it. It's now, and pretty much it's actually impossible in the foreseeable future. But to pull out of the war, that's something they can do. And you have to say Trump has actually taken steps in that direction. It's just that, again, his steps just don't inspire a whole lot of confidence because of the people he has around him. And, his tendency to flip-flop.
He can't.
Right.
He has no ability to control any type of narrative or to counter the narrative. I should say the false narrative.
Yeah,
there's so many things that he could do to counter. Just start showing the videos of the forced conscription. Show the polls where the vast majority of Ukrainians want an end of this war immediately, and they're okay with losing territory. Like, just say that you're all about democracy, then tell Zelensky he has to hold elections. Let the Ukrainian people have a voice. Stop killing all of them. They don't want this war. I almost feel like Americans and Western Europeans want this war more than they want this war. They do want this war more than the Ukrainians themselves. They don't give a damn what the Ukrainians think and what they want. They just have to say, we have to stop Russia, and say like, wait. Look what the Ukrainian people want. And even that the fact that these polls that show that the vast majority of Ukrainians want to end this war, for me means that it's got to be blown way out of proportion. If I'm in Ukraine and I see that they're pulling people off the street, and then someone says like, "Hey, do you support the war?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, yes, it's amazing. I love it." I like just the fact that people are willing to speak out against it in this hostile environment just shows that this is not. This is not representative of what the Ukrainians want, the Ukrainian people. And it's just, anyways.
Right. Anyway, I say, I don't think it's even fair to say that the Europeans want it. It's the European leadership, the European political class that wants the war. Yeah, even when you look at polls of, the people in various European countries, you don't find any significant support for the war, maybe with the exception of the Baltics. Even in Poland, there's a growing dissent, growing opposition to the war. That's true. Again, it's really been a failure. Occasionally Trump says things, but he's not disciplined. He'll reverse himself and say the opposite thing 2 days later. And then he surrounds himself with people that are, pushing forward the old narrative. People like Kellogg, was in Kiev recently saying that, Russia's losing this war, that kind of thing. So you don't have, they basically the narrative that held all through the Biden administration really is still there. There was some hope at the beginning. We had that showdown in the Oval Office and whatever, some reason to hope that maybe the narrative was actually going to be changed significantly. And unfortunately, it's just that Trump hasn't shown the discipline in the organization to do that. I mean, he goes, he's like a reed in the wind. He gets pushed one way and then the other, and it frustrates. The end result is like you still have this institutional inertia, and the political class, they continue to have their way. They suffer minor defeats, but in the end, they still have the narrative. And we're still very much involved in this war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we can end it there, Dad. Maybe on Wednesday we can talk about something a little happier.
Okay.
So a little cheery.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. All right. Thanks a bunch, Dad.
Okay.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.